Hello, my dear friend. Today I will share with you a light and funny story in simple English. It is a story about mistakes, surprises, and a lot of laughter. So sit back, relax, and enjoy a very funny story. In a quiet little village, there lived a man named Thomas. Thomas was not a bad man, not a lazy man, not even a foolish man. But he had one great problem. He was always in a hurry. When he walked, he rushed. When he ate, he swallowed too fast. When he worked, he forgot half the steps. And when he spoke, his words ran out of his mouth before his mind could catch them. People in the village liked him, but they often shook their heads. Thomas is a good man, they said, but oh, how quickly he runs into trouble. One summer morning, Thomas woke up late. He had promised to bring fresh eggs to the market, but the sun was already high. The church bell was ringing, and Thomas had not even collected the eggs yet. He jumped out of bed, pulled on his boots, one correct, one backward, and ran outside. The chickens clucked and flapped as he rushed into the yard. Move, 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 Thomas cried. He grabbed eggs here, eggs there, filling his basket in seconds. He did not notice that some were cracked, that some were still warm from hens. He did not notice that the basket was too small, too full, ready to spill. With the basket wobbling in his hands, Thomas ran down the road toward the market. His boots splashed through mud, his arms shook, and the eggs rolled dangerously. One by one they began to fall. Plop, an egg on the grass. Crack, an egg on the stone. By the time Thomas reached the market, half his eggs were gone, and the rest looked like they had already been cooked on the road. The market women laughed when they saw him. Thomas, what have you done? Are you selling eggs or soup? Thomas blushed, his face red as a tomato. He tried to explain, but the words tumbled out so fast that nobody could understand. In the end, he sold only 3 eggs. 3 out of 20. He walked home with his empty basket, his pockets still empty, too. On the way, he muttered to himself, "Next time, I will not hurry. Next time, I will be careful. Next time, I will do everything slowly." But Thomas was Thomas. And for Thomas, next time always came too late. After the egg disaster, Thomas told himself again and again, "I must be careful, I must be slow." But Thomas was Thomas. And Thomas never stayed careful for long. A few days later, the village held its summer fair. There were stalls of bread and cheese, tables of fruit, barrels of cider, and games for children. The fair was the busiest day of the year, and everyone wanted to look their best. Thomas wanted to look his best too, but as always, he was late. The fair had already begun when Thomas rushed from his house. He wore his good shirt, inside out. He wore his hat, backward, and he carried in his arms a big round pie, baked by his aunt, which he had promised to bring to the fair. The pie was beautiful, golden brown, smelling of apples and sugar. But Thomas, in his hurry, did not see the stone in the road. He tripped. His arms flew up. The pie flew higher. For a second, the pie seemed to hang in the air like the moon. Then, splat! It landed, not on the ground, but on the head of the mayor's wife. The crowd gasped. The mayor's wife stood frozen, apple filling dripping down her face, sugar sticking to her hair. For one long, terrible moment, silence filled the fair. Then, all at once, the laughter began. Children pointed and screamed with delight. Men slapped their knees. Women covered their mouths but could not stop giggling. The mayor's wife, red with anger, marched away without a word, pie crust still sliding from her hat. Thomas stood in the middle of the fair, his face as red as the apples in the pie. He opened his mouth to explain, but as usual, his words came too fast, too tangled, and nobody understood. The more he tried to explain, the louder the people laughed. "Thomas," they shouted, "next time, with a pie instead of carrying it." From that day, whenever Thomas walked to the village, children whispered, pie man," behind him. Thomas sighed, but he could not help smiling a little too. After all, it was funny, though not for the mayor's wife. But trouble did not stop there. Later that week, Thomas decided to fix his reputation. He told himself, "I will do one thing properly, one thing slow and careful. Then people will forget the pie." So he chose to carry water from the well. Simple work, steady work. Surely nothing could go wrong. He filled 2 big buckets, one for each hand. He lifted them with care, step by step. At first, he was proud. The water did not spill, his steps were calm, and his shirt stayed dry. But halfway down the road, Thomas thought, I am doing well. I am careful. I am slow. And in that moment of pride, he forgot to watch the ground. He stepped into a hole. Splash! Both buckets flew up. Water poured over his head, down his shirt, into his boots. Thomas stood dripping like a drowned rooster, while the chickens around the well clucked and ran. Of course, someone was watching. Old Mrs. Green, the baker, saw everything from her window. By evening, the whole village knew. Now Thomas was not only pieman, he was also water boy. Trouble grew around Thomas like weeds in a garden. The more he hurried, the bigger his mistakes. And the bigger his mistakes, the more people laughed. But Thomas did not know yet. His funniest mistake was still waiting. By now, the whole village knew Thomas as the man who made trouble without trying. Some called him Pieman. Others called him Water Boy. But everyone agreed, if Thomas was near, something funny was about to happen. And something funny did happen on the day of the big parade. The parade was the pride of the village. Once every summer, musicians marched, children danced, and farmers showed their best animals. The mayor himself led the way, dressed in a bright red coat, carrying a tall staff like a king. Everyone came out to watch. It was the happiest day of the year. Thomas told himself, "This time I will not make a mistake. This time I will stand quietly and watch like everyone else." He even practiced walking slowly in front of his mirror that morning. Step, step, step. No hurry. No accidents. He was ready, but fate was not ready to let him go. When Thomas arrived at the square, he found the crowd already thick. People were packed together, shoulder to shoulder, cheering as the parade began. Musicians blew trumpets. Drummers beat their drums. Banners waved in the sun. The sound and color made Thomas so excited that he forgot his plan to be careful. He wanted to see better, so he pushed forward. One step, then another, squeezing through the crowd. But the more he pushed, the more people shouted, "Hey, watch it. Careful with my hat. Thomas, slow down." Thomas did not hear them. He saw a gap in front, just behind the mayor. He rushed forward, tripped over a loose rope, and suddenly, he was not in the crowd anymore. He was in the parade. The people cheered louder, thinking it was part of the show. Thomas, confused, waved his arms for balance. The crowd roared with laughter, waving back. The musicians, not knowing what else to do, played louder. Now Thomas, standing right behind the mayor, had no choice but to keep walking, step after step, through the square, past the cheering villagers. Children pointed, shouting, "Look, it's Pie Man in the parade." The mayor, feeling important, thought Thomas had been sent to carry something, so he handed him the tall staff. Thomas took it with both hands, nearly dropping it as the heavy was swung left and right. The crowd clapped wildly, thinking it was a comedy act. "Bravo! Bravo!" they shouted. And so Thomas, who only wanted to watch, now marched through the village as if he were the mayor himself, with the red staff in his hands and the whole crowd laughing. He looked less like a villager and more like a clown king. But the funniest part was still to come. Behind the musicians, the farmers led their animals. Cows decorated with flowers, pigs with ribbons, even a goat with a bell. The goat, however, was not in the mood for a parade. The moment it saw Thomas waving the staff, it charged. Bah! The goat ran forward, its horns down, straight at Thomas. Thomas turned just in time to see it. He tried to step aside, but his foot caught the mayor's coat. The mayor fell backward. The staff flew into the air, and Thomas ran. Straight down the street, the goat chasing him like a storm. The band broke apart. The children screamed with laughter. The crowd nearly fell over each other watching. Thomas ran faster than ever before, his arms flapping, his hat falling, the goat right on his heels. Round and round the square they went, Thomas in front, goat behind, music still playing as the drummers tried to keep up. At last, Thomas jumped into a hay cart, diving headfirst into the soft pile. The goat stopped, confused, chewing on a piece of straw as if nothing had happened. The crowd exploded with cheers, clapping, laughing, crying with joy. The mayor, brushing dust from his coat, tried to look serious, but even he could not stop smiling. "Thomas," he said at last, shaking his head, "you are not a man. You are the parade itself." And from that day, the story spread beyond the village. Travelers told it on the road. Merchants repeated it in other towns. "Have you heard of the man who led the parade and fought the goat?" they asked, laughing until tears came. Thomas, of course, wished to forget it. But everywhere he went, people remembered. And the name stuck forever. Thomas the Parade King. The day after the parade, Thomas woke up with straw still in his hair. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wishing it had all been a dream. But outside he heard voices. Children were laughing in the street. "Parade King, Parade King," they sang. Thomas groaned and pulled the blanket over his head. He tried to hide all morning, but by noon his stomach was louder than his shame. So he walked to the bakery, hoping to buy some bread. The moment he stepped inside, every customer turned and smiled. "Here comes a king," one man shouted. The baker's boy bowed low, holding out a roll like it was a crown. Even Mrs. Green, the serious old woman, laughed so hard she nearly dropped her tray of cakes. Thomas turned red from ears to chin. He waved his arms. No, it was not my fault. I did not mean to join the parade. I did not mean to take the staff. And I certainly did not mean to fight a goat." But the more he explained, the harder everyone laughed, because to them it was not shameful. It was wonderful. It was the best parade the village had ever seen, and Thomas had been the star. By afternoon, people began to retell the story in every corner. One farmer swore that Thomas had spun the staff like a warrior. Another claimed he had seen Thomas bow before the goat like a knight. Each version grew bigger, funnier, more impossible. And Thomas, though embarrassed, could not help laughing too. That evening, the mayor called Thomas to the town hall. Thomas trembled as he entered, sure he would be punished. But instead, the mayor clapped him on the shoulder and said, "Thomas, yesterday you gave this village something rare. You gave us laughter. We will not forget it." From that day on, whenever the parade returned, the people expected Thomas to march. Not as the mayor, not as a farmer, not as a musician, but as himself, the man who made mistakes so big and so funny that they turned into celebration. Thomas no longer tried to fight his reputation. He stopped promising to be slow. He stopped dreaming of being careful. Instead, he learned to laugh at himself. And in laughing at himself, he discovered something important. So every summer, Thomas polished his boots, fixed his hat, and stepped proudly into the parade. The band played, the children cheered, and even the goat walked calmly beside him, decorated with ribbons and bells. Thomas waved, smiling wide, not as pieman or water boy, but as the parade king. As the years passed, Thomas's story spread far beyond the village. Travelers carried it to the next town. Merchants repeated it in busy markets. And soon people he had never met laughed about the Parade King. At first, Thomas felt embarrassed whenever he heard it. But slowly, something inside him changed. He realized that laughter was not his enemy. It was his gift. Yes, he made mistakes. Yes, he hurried too much, tripped too often, and always found trouble. But because of him, people smiled. Because of him, children giggled and adults forgot their worries, even for a little while. And in a world full of heavy burdens, what could be more precious than that? Thomas began to see life differently. When he spilled water, he laughed first. When he dropped bread, he laughed louder than anyone else. And when the goat sneezed on his new coat, he laughed until his sides ached. Each time, the people around him laughed too, and together their joy grew stronger. He understood then, laughter is like bread. It is better when shared. And it is like music. It travels quickly from one heart to another. The children of the village grew up hearing the story of the parade king. To them, Thomas was not just a man who chased eggs or fought goats. He was the man who showed them that mistakes are not the end of the world. He was the man who taught them that sometimes the best thing you can do is smile, even when life makes you look foolish. In the end, Thomas left the village only once or twice, but his story traveled farther than he ever did. And wherever it went, it left the same gift, the sound of laughter. Because life is full of serious things. Life is full of hard work, long roads, and heavy days. But life is also full of funny moments, if we are willing to see them. And sometimes, the greatest wisdom is simple. Not to fear laughter, not to run from it, but to welcome it. So the lesson of Thomas, the parade king, is this. Do not be afraid of mistakes. Do not be ashamed if people laugh. For laughter is not a chain, it is freedom. It is not weakness, it is strength. And when you can laugh at yourself, the world laughs with you, not at you. Headphone outro. Thank you, my dear friend, for listening to this story. A very funny story reminds us that mistakes are not the end of the world. Sometimes they bring laughter, and laughter is a gift we can share with others. I hope this story helped you practice your English listening and also gave you a smile. Because learning English should not only be hard work, it should also be fun. When you laugh, you remember more, and when you enjoy the story, the words stay with you longer. So do not be afraid of mistakes in life or in learning. Smile, laugh, and keep moving forward. Thank you again for joining me today. See you in the next story.